Hello and good day. I am Coach Jay, and I always like to start my classes with a corny dad joke. So today's is this. I gave up my seat on a bus to a blind lady, and that is how I lost my job as a bus driver. But bump. If you can take two deep healing breaths with me in through the nose, out through the mouth, preferably with your eyes closed, but however you feel safest. One more time. Okay. Tim, I'm going to be talking about like a dozen symptoms of c-PTSD. So c-PTSD or complex trauma is ongoing or repeated interpersonal trauma where the victim is traumatized over and over. Now, let me just say something very quick before we start. I always say other people give us pain, but we give ourselves suffering. And I'm going to say something that might be triggering to a lot of you watching. There's a school of thought out there, and I'm not saying I subscribe to this necessarily, but there's a school of thought out there that says people can give us pain, but our narrative or what we attach that pain to is actually what traumatizes us. Now, I need you to listen with your prefrontal cortex, not your trauma or triggers. A lot of times, when somebody makes decisions that hurt us, and don't get me wrong, it's disgusting and abhorrent and monstrous and inexcusable. But the narrative or the story that we attach to it is often what traumatizes us, not necessarily what the behavior. Again, I'm not saying I necessarily subscribe to that, but if that's something you can wrap your head around and it stops you or prevents you from creating unnecessary narratives and stories, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't pretty enough, I was worthless, I'm not respected, what have you, then that will jumpstart a lot of your healing journey. Okay, ongoing child abuse could cause c-PTS. Uh, Being held in captivity, like kidnapping, could cause c-PTSD. Domestic violence, especially if one person that's in for a long term, that absolutely can cause c-PTSD. So c-PTSD is something that happens more than once, multiple times over a long time. Now, a lot of people would absolutely consider infidelity that if there's been repeated infidelities and then you go back and then it's another infidelity and then you go back, things like that. All right. Complex PTSD is a proposed disorder which is very different from, say, PTSD. Many of the issues and symptoms endured by complex trauma survivors are outside of the list of symptoms within the uncomplicated PTSD diagnosis criterion. So complex PTSD does acknowledge and validate that these do have interwoven uh, symptoms and similarities. But like I said, they're actually, you know what I heard one time? c-PTSD is almost like death by 1,000 cuts. So somebody can either take a knife, excuse the analogy, take a knife and you're devastated. I mean, you got a hole in your heart now, and that's horrible. Or you pass away, from that. But c-PTSD is like death by 1,000 cuts. And sometimes those cuts are not paper cuts. They could be pretty profound. All right, the impact, you know what, I'm just going to get right into some of these symptoms just for time purposes. There's a lot. There's a lot. There's dozens. I'm just going to give you some of the ones that are at the top of that list. Number one, fear of trust. Absolute fear of trust. And I'm going to tell you something. That fear of trust starts with you, starts with us, starts within. Absolutely, we have a fear of trust around everybody else around us. But that fear of trust, first of all, starts with us, because what's the first thing that we do when we get betrayed, deceived, decimated by secrets? Is we start to put together a story. Why I picked this person, why wasn't my picker good enough? Or I trusted this person. Obviously, I was off. I must be A, B, and C. So the first person that we lose trust in a lot of times is ourselves. Um, Number two, very quickly, terminal aloneness. Terminal aloneness. You know, this is it's a terrible, painful aloneness. You just feel alone, which is one of the things that makes betrayal trauma different from other traumas. You know, if you lose a parent or you lose a loved one, you have a lot of your community that comes together. You have a lot of your friends and family that come together. Your neighbors, your boss understands. When you are betrayed by a loved one, especially in a committed relationship, you may or may not want to share that with people, and so you feel isolated, you feel alone, and that's a which makes the journey to heal all the more difficult. And again, it's very different from non-betrayal trauma because you know you lose somebody significant in your life. You're going to get cards, you're going to get flowers, you might have a neighbor bring over a meatloaf, what have you. You find out the person you loved and trusted the most was having an affair. You don't want to shout it from the rooftop. It's there's no ad in the paper like there is a loss or family. So you feel alone, very much alone. Another one is your emotion regulation is all off, all off. I mean, you, you know, so our amygdala, which is the almond-shaped portion in our lower, just in the back of the brain, kind of like lower portion, is our smoke alarm. If you take a smoke alarm and you take a sledgehammer and you pounce on it, it's going to go off even if there's no fire. It's just it's out of whack. You ever go to the fair or a carnival or a festival and you have those whack-a-moles? Well, that's what deception does to your amygdala. And now it's like you can be in the store buying milk and eggs and you fear somebody's in the other aisle about to pounce on you, steal your purse, knock you out. I mean, you just live in a state of constant hypervigilance and things like that. Emotional flashbacks. Now, obviously, these are called triggers, and uh, if you've had them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You could be doing dishes, being intimate with your partner, praying in church, taking a shower, and you get a flashback, an emotional flashback or a trigger. Boy, it can take you to your knees. And triggers are not just a reminder of what happened in the first acute 3 to 4 months after D-Day. They actually make you relive that initial trauma. So emotional flashbacks are no joke, no joke. And like I said, they can bring you to your knees. I have a lot of tips and techniques on how to proactively address them to stop them, but that's another class that I did. So feel free to look at that. All right. I told you about hypervigilance. I just want to reiterate that you are hypervigilant about everything and everyone. When you have a primary deception, a person in your life, a primary attachment who deceived you, you question everything and everyone. You start questioning now, are my parents trying to bamboozle me? Are my kids trying to get over one on me? You don't trust the bank teller. You don't, I mean, everyone becomes suspicious. If the person you trusted your everything with can hurt you as deep as they did, everyone's capable of bamboozling you now. You are in a state of hypervigilance, um, not only with people, but places and things. You go out to a restaurant, you see somebody walk in with a long black coat, and you're like, oh, what are they hiding under that coat? You know, could it be a gun? You know, you're just in a state of hypervigilance. Everywhere you go, everything you do doesn't matter. You are on guard, which is why so many people are exhausted on this journey because you're on constant alert and you get very little rest. Even when you're sleeping, you can't get rest. So hypervigilance is huge and it takes a toll on our body. Hypervigilance is one of the reasons why a month after D-Day, you look like you aged 25 years. Now, I will say, and now I'm getting off on a tangent, I will say stress related aging can reverse itself, thank the Lord. but it does happen. And after D-Day, you're stressed. You're not taking care of your body. You're not really exercising. You're not really getting the fluids you need. You're not doing anything that makes you joy and happy. You shrivel up in your bed in the fetal position like a prune, and you wind up looking like one after a few months. Like I said, with some time and work, you go back to being that beautiful being that you were before. But many of my clients tell me, Mr. J, I've aged 20 years in the past 2 months, unfortunately. All right, I digress. A loss of faith, complex trauma survivors often endure a loss of faith. This can be about people, the world being good around them, certainly religion. I mean, I worked with a woman years and years and years ago. Unfortunately, she lost her husband and her 2 children in a car accident. And now, there was no infidelity or nothing like that in her relationship, but she did lose her husband and children, and she was a very, very deep person of faith. And she said, for a good 7 years, maybe 8 years, she said, I really questioned God's existence. And she said, I grew up in the church. She says, but when I was a little girl, I prayed all my life saying, God, bring me a nice man, bring me a husband. I want a family. That's all I wanted. And a couple of years after I got my prayer answered, my entire family was in a car accident, passed away. I lost my faith. So if you have struggled or are struggling with your faith, this is common. It is common, unfortunately. So complex trauma survivors often view the world as dangerous and people, and like I said, maybe even your creator, as unjust or abusive or not understanding or mean or non-existent or what have you. Um, Many complex survivors walk away from their religious beliefs, absolutely, without question. For example, to believe that in a good and loving God who allows such suffering and heinous abuse um, to occur, that can feel like an ultimate betrayal. Ultimate betrayal. Um, all right. The next one with CPSD is your inner child is, I want to say profoundly hurt, but honestly, that's an understatement. I mean, ooh, your inner child, this does a number on your inner child. Childhood complex trauma survivors often have very hurt inner child that continues to affect the survivor into adulthood. So if you've had trauma in your childhood, developmental trauma, then you stack on top of that trauma in your adult life. I explain it to some of my clients like this. If you take a rubber band and you stretch it, it still has elasticity. You stretch it, you stretch it, you stretch it, it still has elasticity. You stretch it and keep stretching it over 2 years, 20 years. If it doesn't break, it loses elasticity. Now, I never want to give anybody watching this no hope to heal. I've been doing this long enough to know that, and Lord, I've heard some stories. Oh, I've heard some stories. You can always heal. You can always heal. Well, you can manage your pain. You can manage your healing. You can manage your triggers to a profound degree. Um, but when we experience a lot of trauma in our life, consistent, long-term, endless trauma, we do lose some elasticity. We do. Um, all right. The next one I'll just talk about very quickly is helplessness and toxic shame. Due to the enduring, ongoing, repeated abuse or deceit or betrayal or what have you, we can develop a sense of hopelessness that nothing will ever be okay. We can feel so profoundly damaged that we see no hope for things to get better. So, this this does a number on our mind, body, and soul. And here I'm talking about, the mind. We can absolutely get into a spiral of hopelessness, which is why I say all the time, you got to be very, very careful of the narratives and the stories that you attach to things. Really, you do. Keep in mind, listen, there's not a soul that has ever or will ever walk the face of the earth that has not been hurt, deceived, lied to. I don't say that to minimize what you went through, but just to say, just like death, nobody escapes this world. There's always going to be a little tag on our big toe when we take our last breath. Nobody escapes this world without some type of deception and betrayal and deceit. So try not to feel so alone, try not to feel so hopeless, but you will go through a stage and a phase where you do. And there's shame. This is common. This shame is common, especially people with sexual abuse. Um, uh, well, I don't want to get into nitty gritties because this is going to go out publicly to a lot of people, but especially people around sexual abuse. And yes, you can be sexually abused in a marriage, but there's a lot of shame. And I highly recommend that you do some work around that because shame uh, will corrode its container. And if you are living with shame, you will eventually start corroding yourself, and your inner child deserves much better. Another thing that c-PTSD fighters, I don't like the word survivor, although if you use it, wonderful, but I like fighter. Um, happens is we're always looking for a rescuer. And that's why, let me tell you something. And here I'm gonna about to digress again, but I promise I won't stay there. So many times when we have a lot of childhood trauma, developmental trauma, what we do is we're looking for that rescuer in our adult life. And we find somebody who, for whatever reason, presents themselves or seems like a rescuer or a safe person, and we latch onto them. We attach to them, boy, like holy crap. Yeah, bees to honey. Then, for whatever reason, they deceive us, they betray us. This is where our world can crumble. We're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I I thought this person was going to lift me up when I fell. I thought this person was going to renew my faith in humanity. And all they did was hurt me, probably more so than my parents ever hurt me, probably more so than that childhood bully ever hurt me, probably more so than the person who sexually aggressed towards me, because I purposely gave my heart to this person and they trampled on it. This is no joke. This pain, this journey is no joke. I tell people all the time, if you take a big, huge rock and you throw it in the middle of a pond, it's going to have a ripple effect. There's not going to be 1 inch of water that's not touched by this rock in the middle of the pond. This is what betrayal, infidelity, cheating, deception in a relationship, this is what this does. There's no part of your life that's untouched or unaffected. All right. Um, Next one, which I'm on 10 if you guys are keeping track, but is dissociation. When enduring ongoing abuse, the brain can utilize dissociation as a coping method. This can be from daydreaming to more life-impacting forms of dissociation, such as DID, dissociative identity disorder. This is, and I'll tell you something, a lot of, and again, I want to try to keep this PG rated because this is going out to the public, but a lot of people that are, that have experienced victimization from a sexual aggressor, they can dissociate. I'll never forget, I was reading a book one time. It's called Flying High. I read this in college. Flying High. And this woman, her dad was a doctor, and her dad would, come in and do things at night. And she said it got to the point where I would come out of my body and I would be looking down on what was going on. And that was her way of dissociating. So dissociating could be on a very small level or on a very grand level. Um, by the way, her dad was a doctor, and at the end of the book, one of her friends, and she was healed. I mean, man, this lady did some work, and she was really healed. And at the end of the book, I think one of her friends gave her an apple and said, "Here, an apple a day keeps the doctor away," or something, and made some kind of funny joke or innuendo just to say that you got this, you are a survivor, you are a fighter, and I'm your friend. I'm going to be with you along the way and stuff like that. It was a good book, Flying High, but I read this like 30 years ago. All right, again, I digress. All right, another one, another symptoms is persistent sadness and possibly suicidal or homicidal tendencies. I know probably for if I can't give a statistic, I just can't, but I would say many more people are suicidal than homicidal. But I've had my share of clients who just got out of prison or jail or are facing it because they were like, I did A, B, and C when I found out I was being bamboozled. You don't play with me. So I went and I did A, B, and C, and now they're facing some legal charges or have or what have you. But then there's obviously the internal. There's the suicidal aspect of things. It's like, what is the sense of living if I poured my all, if I gave all my eggs into this basket and it was just demolished, what's the sense of living? So complex trauma survivors often experience ongoing states of sadness and, so like I said, severe depression. Mood disorders are often comorbid with complex PTSD. Complex trauma survivors, or again, if you want to say fighters, are at a high risk for suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. That's just, unfortunately, is what it is. You just have to be very careful with that. You just have to be very careful. And I'm going to say this I mean, I've already stepped out on a limb so many times during this huge class. I'm going to say this. A lot of people that experience trauma, PTSD, c-PTSD, have had passing suicidal thoughts. They're not healthy, but they can be common. What's unhealthy is when you start fixating on those thoughts. I'm just going to leave that there. All right, muscle armoring. So many complex trauma survivors who have experienced ongoing abuse develop what's called body hypervigilance. This is where the body is continually tensed. And though the body your body is just braced for altercation. It's braced for potential trauma. It's braced for battle. Anybody that's ever been, I served 8 years in the military. Luckily, I missed wars, but one of the things they teach you is that when you are about to go into battle, how your nervous system just changes. Well, so let's just, bear with me for a second. Let's just say you're on the front line and man, you got your battle gear on and your sword is drawn and you're about to go into battle. I mean, your heartbeat is racing, you might have some sweat, whatever. This could be the everyday life of somebody that was betrayed. This is your constant state. It's like you're in a constant state of battle. Your body's on guard. And this leads to pain issues such as, muscles being overworked, your headaches, migraines. Man, I'll tell you something. This is linked to IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, night sweats, panic attacks. I can go on and on and on. Chronic pain and other issues related, such as chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. This can result absolutely without question. I'm going to tell you something. I'm not going to give a stat at all, but you'd be surprised at how many physical ailments and symptoms occurred because of a deception, a trauma in somebody's life. Again, all of these are very normal for complex trauma survivors. But if you stay on them, they're unhealthy. If you give in to them, they're unhealthy. If you don't work on them, they're unhealthy. That's the point. So, not every person who has endured betrayal will experience all of these, but a good majority will experience some of these and others that I didn't mention. I don't have the time to mention them. I always suggest that you speak to somebody that's trauma informed, and thankfully everybody on here is, or hopefully everybody that you're dealing with is trauma informed. But most importantly for now, if you want to take anything out from this class, please ensure that, every day you are looking in the mirror and you are giving yourself a smile and you are living in a constant state of empathy, gentleness, compassion, forgiveness, and love. Because as RuPaul says, honey, if you don't love yourself, nobody else ain't going to do it. So love yourself, be compassionate, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for believing any of the lies that you told yourself or other people. Be compassionate, be gentle. This is a journey, and you're going to really have to give yourself a lot of compassion. But you are a survivor. You are a fighter. You're not what happened to you. After all, you're the person who's fighting it. You're the survivor. You are the outcome of your hard work. The hero of your story. That's who you are.